They fired first. The United States says it just eliminated 16 Iranian mine-laying vessels near the Strait of Hormuz. That is not a warning shot. That is direct kinetic contact at the world's most lethal energy choke point. This is the threshold. Mine warfare has moved from threat to execution, and Washington chose preemption over patience. Every intelligence agency is panicking because mines don't need a navy. Mines only need one night. And when mines enter Hormuz, the global economy enters a countdown. Not theory, not pundit noise. A hard mechanical timer driven by oil flows and insurance math. Before the strike, the world lived inside a fragile assumption. Deterrence was holding. Markets priced in turbulence, not paralysis. Shipping executives bet on managed risk, not a closed corridor. The illusion was simple. Iran would posture, the US would signal, and tankers would still move. A dance of threats that never crossed the line into irreversible disruption. But the illusion shattered the moment Iran's mine-laying moved from capability to intent. Minefields don't announce themselves. They just appear, and then ships stop moving. Now you're watching the world learn a brutal lesson. The strait isn't wide. The strait is a funnel, and funnels are made for ambush. AP reports Iran vowed to block the region's oil exports, promising not even a single liter reaches its enemies. That is absolute language for an absolute strategy. It means Tehran is not bargaining. It is squeezing. So Washington hit the mine layers. Not later. Not after a tanker sinks. Now, while the mine threat is still forming, this is not about pride. It's about preventing a single object from turning into a global panic event. One mine, one blast, one burning hull on live video. Because the market doesn't need confirmation. The market only needs fear, and fear spreads faster than crude. Now, lock onto the map. At its narrowest, the strait is about 21 miles wide, but the usable shipping lanes are microscopic. 2 miles outbound, 2 miles inbound, 2 miles of buffer. That traffic separation scheme is a corridor, not a sea. It is a highway in water with almost no room to dodge. A single obstruction forces hesitation. A single mine forces a halt. And here's the terrifying geometry. The lanes sit inside Iranian and Omani territorial waters at the narrowest point. So every transit is political. Every transit is contested. Every transit is watched. Now add the oil math. In 2024, EIA says oil flows through Hormuz averaged about 20 million barrels per day. That's about 20% of global petroleum liquids consumption. That's not a lot. That's systemic. That's the bloodstream of industry, transport, and food logistics. Remove it, and the global body convulses. EIA also warns there are very few alternatives if the strait is effectively shut. Some pipelines can bypass, but the spare capacity is limited. In an emergency, EIA estimates about 2.6 million barrels per day could bypass via Saudi and UAE routes. Do the subtraction. 20 million at risk, and maybe 2.6 million can detour quickly. That gap is where price spikes live. That gap is where recession begins. Saudi Arabia's east-west pipeline has major capacity on paper, but it is not a magic portal. The UAE pipeline to Fujairah helps, but it cannot replace Hormuz. Even Iran's Gorej-Ask route is around 300,000 barrels per day. So Iran's mine threat isn't just military. It's macroeconomic blackmail with a maritime trigger. It aims at the weak spot: global dependence, global debt, global inflation sensitivity. Now, understand the weapon. Mines are cheap compared to missiles. They are silent compared to drones. And they force the strongest navy on Earth to crawl. Maritime Executive Reports estimates that Iran has at least 2,000 mines in inventory, with the means to deploy them. And CNN reporting cited there describes an initial tranche of just a few dozen mines. Just a few dozen can freeze a corridor. Because clearance is slow, verification is slow, confidence is slow. Tanker captains don't sail on promises. They sail on insurance. That's why this story is not just explosions. It's paperwork. It's premiums. It's underwriters quietly deciding the sea is no longer insurable at any price. NBC reports insurers are already canceling policies and renegotiating at higher prices. One broker predicted prices could rise as much as 50%. Another warned costs could increase as much as 100%. That is the invisible blockade. BBC reports the cost of hiring a supertanker to ship oil from the Middle East to China nearly doubled, reaching over $400,000 per day. That's not market jitters. That's a crisis tariff. And ships are already being hit. AP reports a cargo ship was struck by a projectile in the strait and set ablaze with crew evacuating. That is what deterrence failure looks like in real time. Now zoom out. About 3,000 ships usually transit the strait each month, per BBC reporting. When traffic slows, the global supply chain doesn't bend, it breaks. NBC lays out the downstream shock. Rerouting can add weeks, collapse just-in-time logistics, and create port congestion. This is how a regional fight becomes a global inflation event. Delay becomes scarcity. Scarcity becomes rage. And this is why 16 mine-laying boats matter. Not because of their tonnage, because of what they represent. A state choosing the no-return tool. Mines don't signal strength. Mines signal desperation. Reuters reports President Trump publicly demanded any mines be removed immediately, while claiming no confirmed reports they were placed. That contradiction is the point. You don't wait for certainty when the cost of waiting is catastrophe. Axios reports a senior U.S. official described the strike as preemptive, driven by intelligence about operational plans. That's the key phrase. Operational plans. Not rhetoric, not propaganda. A plan you stop before it becomes a headline with bodies. But here's the part that should chill you. Maritime executive notes deploying mines doesn't require big ships. Mines can be launched from small craft and midget submarines. That means the fleet is not just boats. The fleet is the coastline. So even after 16 vessels are destroyed, the threat may still be alive. It becomes distributed. It becomes harder to see. It becomes easier to deny. That's why this turns into a maritime meat grinder. Mines force clearance. Clearance forces presence. Presence invites missiles, drones, and swarming attacks. It's escalation by geometry. And the strait is perfect for asymmetric warfare. Short distances, crowded waters, civilian traffic, a place where mistakes are guaranteed and attribution becomes a battlefield. Meanwhile, the capitals go quiet, not because they don't care, because they're calculating exposure. Asia takes the hit first, because most Hormuz flows go to Asian markets per EIA analysis. EIA estimates 84% of crude and condensate and 83% of LNG through Hormuz went to Asia in 2024. That means China, India, Japan, and South Korea face immediate vulnerability. Their factories run on this corridor. The United States imports far less Persian Gulf crude than in the past, EIA says, about 0.5 million barrels per day in 2024. So America's pain is not only at the pump, America's pain is in global price contagion. Now watch the Gulf states. They can't absorb a sustained shutdown without fiscal damage. They also can't openly side against Iran without becoming targets. So they sit in strategic silence. Silence is not neutrality. Silence is fear management. AP reports ships have effectively halted movement through the strait as attacks and threats mount. That is the nightmare scenario. A de facto closure without a declared closure. It's paralysis without paperwork. And in paralysis, the black market thrives. AP reports dark transits, vessels turning off tracking, with some tankers believed linked to Iran still slipping through. When lawful trade stops, shadow trade becomes policy. So what happens next is not about emotion. It's about the red line calculation inside Tehran. Reuters quotes an IRGC-linked message. Any movement of U.S. fleets and allies will be stopped by missiles and drones. That's a deterrence claim. It's also a dare. Iran's choice is claustrophobic. If it escalates, it risks inviting overwhelming strikes that degrade what remains of its maritime capability. If it does not escalate, it risks losing its only leverage, the chokepoint threat. This is game theory under pressure. Iran doesn't need to win a naval battle. It needs to raise the cost of passage until the world begs Washington to stop. That is leverage. That is survival logic. Mines offer plausible deniability, but also mutual damage. Maritime executive notes mining is seen as last resort because it also disrupts Iran's own shipping. That's what makes this so extreme. It suggests Tehran is willing to take self-harm to impose global pain. And Washington's calculation is equally cold. Let mines go in, and you risk a tanker disaster that detonates oil prices and credibility. Hit mine layers early, and you accept escalation into direct contact. The U.S. chose contact. Reuters also reports the U.S. military has refused near-daily industry requests for escorts so far, even as options are being examined. That tells you how dangerous the corridor has become. Escorting isn't a service, it's a combat mission. So the next move is likely to be indirect. More mines from smaller platforms. More missiles aimed near shipping lanes. More drones probing for a political kill shot. Not a single decisive battle, but a grinding erosion of confidence. And that's why this moment feels like a trap closing. The strait's lanes are 2 miles wide. The buffer is 2 miles wide. When fear enters that corridor, it expands to fill the entire space. You can almost hear the market holding its breath. Oil moves on expectations, not just barrels. Insurance moves on worst-case scenarios, not best-case assurances. And right now, the worst-case scenario has momentum. The footage of this crisis is already feeding the cycle. U.S. officials are pointing to strikes and destroyed mine layers, and outlets are circulating updates in near real time. This is what escalation looks like in the modern information battlespace. But none of that video changes the core reality. Destroying 16 vessels is not the same as eliminating the mine threat. Maritime executive reports many mine layers were believed to have survived earlier strikes, and mines can be deployed by small craft. The threat is resilient. So now we enter the most dangerous phase, the silence before the next decision. Commanders are staring at radar returns, Traders are staring at price charts. Captains are staring at the horizon, deciding whether to risk their crews. In the next 24 hours, Iran must decide whether to convert threat into irreversible closure tactics, and the US must decide whether it shifts from strikes to sustained control operations. That's the cliff edge. That's the moment where accidents become policy. Remember the rule of three. The strait is narrow, the mines are cheap, the consequences are vertical, and every actor knows the same ugly truth. If Hormuz becomes reliably no-go, prices don't just rise. They spike, they persist, and they infect everything from food to freight. That's why this is a red line event. So here's the unresolved question that should keep you awake tonight. After the US says it destroyed 16 mine-laying vessels, does Iran pull back, or does it spread the mine threat into a shadow campaign? Because if it spreads, there's no clean victory, only endurance. Share this video while the window is still open. Drop your prediction in the comments because the algorithm rewards urgency, and this story is pure urgency. In the next 24 hours, the strait either reopens in fear or closes in fire.